All right. I have no idea why I couldn't get it on my computer, so I'm on my phone. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined today, whether that is in the Zoom chat or if you are live on social media. Thank you for joining in on our first community conversation. There has been a lot of work that has been done over the last year as it relates to closing the gap between the community and the sheriff's office around the stipulation that the DOJ has, working with the monitoring team, working with the CAC Council, and working with the sheriffs. Actually, Supervisor Perez just texted me she needs the link. I think there are quite a few challenges with people getting into the Zoom for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Do anyone have her cell phone number? They can just text that to her.
I have her assistance, and I sent it to him this morning, but I can text it to him.
Yeah, they said, I don't think Marissa said, I don't think the link is hyperlinked to Zoom because there was some great challenges on getting on. I will send it to her once I do the welcome and turn it over to Tiara if no one has. I really want to thank this team that worked really, that were very dedicated to making sure this conversation took place and to provide a space for the community and the sheriff to have this dialogue. We're going to take this opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing and really make an ask of the community to join into those efforts. And we hope you will stay tuned for the entire 90 minutes of the conversation. This work cannot happen without the community. And we heard the community when this work first started. We heard your cry, we heard your request. 25 plus members have been committed to this. Some have had the opportunity to be more in the front of making this happen. But I'm asking you today, join into this conversation, get involved, join us in closing the gap between the community and the sheriff's office. This is what I will say. When I came to this work, I came with a lot of biases. But really getting up close and personal, working with the sheriff's department, I realized that both of us have work to do. The community have work to do, the sheriff's department, sheriff's office have work to do. And it can only happen if we do it together. But here's what I've learned. Both sides are willing because we all have the same goal, and that's to have a safe community for our families and our children. So I'm asking you to join us, put your biases aside, bring in whatever it is. I have learned that the sheriff's department, and it was to my surprise, is very open and willing to listen. We have to have the conversation. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tiara King. And I want to thank our chair of our communications committee, Marilyn Droppers, for all your hard work, you and your team on these efforts. God bless you. I'm going to go ahead and forward. I'm going to turn my camera off so that I can just be able to listen. Thank you all for joining. Again, my name is Arlena Waller. I am the chair of the CAC. Tiara, it's up to you now.
Thank you, Arlena. Welcome, everyone. As she stated, we've got a lot of work, exciting work to kind of brief you on today. So as we're waiting, I'm not sure if Supervisor Perez was able to get on yet. I'm assuming, Marilyn, if you could just kind of give me a heads up, we'll continue on. I want to go over some housekeeping rules before we get started. First and foremost, as you know, this meeting is being recorded. We're also live streaming it on some of the social media outlets, so you might be watching from there. We will have a Q&A section at the end of our panel discussion. So if any of you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll go over it at that time. And then lastly, just wanted to let you guys know, please remain on mute. When you come in, especially as people are talking, we don't want to interrupt. We want to make sure that everyone is able to get their to get the full information. And I do see Supervisor Perez has joined us. So I will give you the floor, Supervisor Perez.
Can you hear me? I can't see you. Can you see me?
I can see you and hear you. You look well. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I don't know how much time I have. I think a couple minutes. Is that correct? Is that
That's
correct? Okay, thank you so much. Well, it is an incredible privilege to be any part of this conversation at all, even if it's just to express my incredible hopefulness and my excitement that we are getting together, listening to one another, and developing friendships that I believe will last a lifetime. I have learned so much in this community by listening to my partners in public safety, in particular, my dear, dear friend, John Money from the Sheriff's Department, who together we mentored dozens of kids together, took them all over the state of California into Sacramento, many of them going to the spaghetti factory for the first time, or even getting on an elevator for the first time, right? Together, jointly, we loved on these kids, and John Money taught me so much about mentorship, about keeping standards high, and about holding our kids accountable and doing it with love. He showed me how to do it. I learned from him, and I don't know anybody who's done more for East Side kids than John Money. And I put that forward to you as an honest testimonial about people that have impacted my life and who I know are changing this community. And I know whose heart is in this community. So I say humbly to you, a rising tide lifts all boats. I believe when we lock arms and say, this is our community, what it looks like is up to us. Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody outside of this community understands us. This is our community. And when we listen to each other, it really is the best of us. When we open our heart to friendship and open our heart to even correction, right? And constructive criticism. I think there is so much growth in that for each of us individually on our own journeys. But coming together like this is the best of us. I believe in Kern County. I believe in this conversation, and I know it's going to improve all of our lives. God bless you for being here in good faith. I'm your partner. I promise to be with you every step of the way. Thank you for your leadership, and to all partners in public safety. You know, God bless you for the risks you take and the dangers that we know you face. Our communities are beautiful places with beautiful people. And if we stick together, I know that we can make magic. So thank you for the opportunity, and God bless you. God bless your hands and your heart and your words, because they reflect, you know, who we are. And I know that we can do so much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Your words are so very appreciated. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and get started on our policy update. So we're going to start with the Policy and Education Committee with Susan and Rosa.
Thank you, Tara. Welcome, everybody. My name is Susan Lawal, and I'm the co-chair of the Policy and Education Subcommittee. The Policy and Education Subcommittee under the Community Advisory Council was formed to listen and to learn and to create positive change. Together with the Kern County Sheriff's Office and Evident Change and the community at large, we will provide informed feedback on KCSO policy, education, and training to ensure full and effective compliance of the stipulated judgment. And this is to ensure that the Kern County Sheriff's Office protects individuals' statutory and constitutional rights, treats individuals with dignity and respect, and promotes public safety in a manner that is fiscally responsible and responsive to the community's priorities. So in line with the agreement reached in the fixed stipulated judgment, our subcommittee has prioritized reviewing the following KCSO policies. We have been reviewing the use of force policy, such as use of canines, use of force reporting, and training and analysis, stops, seizures, and searches. We've also been reviewing the bias-free policing policy, the complaint policy, as well as we have been supporting the development of a community policing strategy and policy, and have been looking at language access policy. So currently, the committee is finalizing a strategy to review the policies. So this strategy will include presenting a timeline of when each policy is reviewed. Also, we will be looking at when and how community input is incorporated, and how we will also include KCSO policy experts in the policy revision process. The community input is, we're very passionate about including community input in this process. So to do this, the subcommittee has been looking at meaningful ways that we can include the community in an effective feedback loop. So we're working on identifying suitable platforms that the community can join us in this process and provide ongoing input throughout the review process. We also plan to hold regular biannual and quarterly community forums such as this one to get community feedback and also to provide updates on our activities and our process. So while we've been laying out this framework, we have also been continuously reviewing KCSO policies and training initiatives. We have also been reviewing additional materials in order to guide our work. Of course, we've been reviewing the fixed stipulated judgment. We've also been looking at the President's task force on 21st century policing, as well as patterns and practices of police excessive force in Kern County. Of course, we've been looking at laws pertaining to this issue, such as Assembly Bill 392, the Senate Bill 1421, Assembly Bill 953, and Senate Bill number 2. We've also been looking at best practices and professional standards for police practice. So lastly, I would like to introduce you to the members of the Policy and Education Committee. They include our chair, Tiara King, who's also our moderator today, me, the co-chair, Susan Lawal, Michelle Oja, Rosa Lopez, Marissa Christensen London, Kevin Gill, Tom Morgan, Peter Hibbett, and of course the Kern County Sheriff's Office and Evident Change. Thank you so much. And I'll be open for questions during our question and answer session.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pavan to discuss equitable employment, and community engagement.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Pavan Gill. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the county, and I am also lucky to be a part of the Policy and Education Committee, as well as the Community and Policing and Employment, Employment and Engagement is, I believe, what we renamed to. So we have been working for the past several months with the Kern County Sheriff's Office, the Kern County Human Resources team, the DOJ Monitoring Committee, and the CAC to look at our hiring practices. And what we have done is we've drafted a recruitment and hiring plan that we're working on finalizing. And I'm just going to take a couple of minutes just to go through what the different initiatives that we've identified so far are. So we've been looking right now at evaluating our job specifications to mitigate for bias and really emphasize community-oriented policing. So we're looking at the job qualifications. We're looking at the language that is used in our job descriptions, developing an ideal candidate profile, and really incorporating language that places an increased emphasis on community policing, interaction, and collaborative problem solving. The second thing that we're doing is we're updating our bulletins to increase transparency in the recruitment processes and communicate our commitment to DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion in our job postings. What we would like to do is really increase access by letting people understand the application process a little bit more. For anyone who's familiar with public safety hiring, there's a lot of steps throughout the process. And what we're really trying to do is educate everyone on the different steps, provide as many resources as we can to support candidates through the process, and incorporate this language of DEI so the community, our potential applicants, and the department are able to, really express what they are looking for and what is important to us as an organization, both in who we employ and how we really treat the community. The third is looking at reducing barriers to entry for underrepresented candidates. This is going to involve doing just-in-time micro-learnings, trainings on implicit bias for all of the people that are involved in the application review and for the evaluators, for interviewers. So we can really make sure that when people are sitting down and going through this hiring process, that they are aware of implicit bias. They are aware of all the different things that really do influence the way we receive information. And we're really looking to just enhance our current recruitment process. The fourth is to attract new and diverse talent pipelines. And today's forum is really, really important for that, because a lot of building that robust applicant and diverse pipeline is about having connections with the community, relationships with every single group in our community. And I have my contact information up here for you. We really want to hear from you. If you have an idea of where we should be recruiting, shortcomings that we have in the process, we want to hear from you. We're soliciting your feedback. And I encourage you to give me a call, send me an email, and really get in touch to start getting these conversations going. What we're doing is we're putting a plan in place, but we anticipate this is going to be a work in progress. And so as soon as I hear from you, we can make sure that we're incorporating feedback that we get from you. I think I'm running a little bit short on time. So that'll just lead me to the next part, which is very much related, and it's expanding our community outreach efforts. And again, this is for all of the different things, all the different initiatives we're doing, including our outreach to our local high schools, community colleges, private colleges, Cal State Bakersfield. We want to develop these key partnerships with community organizations and education centers. And then we also want to look at how we can recruit and be competitive outside of Kern County and really expand our reach. So my information is available above, is available on screen. Please feel free to reach out at any time, and we'd love to engage you in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. And you were right on time, right on time. Well, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the Communication Committee. Marilyn.
Thank you, Tiara. My name is Marilyn Droppers. I am the chair of the Communications Committee. And as you've heard, a running theme through our meetings so far is the importance of communication. We want to be sure that we share with you now and continue to share how to reach out to us. Our meetings, first of all, are open to the public. They're held the third Monday of each month, with the exception of December. Currently, we're meeting over Zoom and are anxious, once that is possible, to move to in-person meetings with the community. There are several ways that you can reach out to us in addition to our meetings. There is an email address, and that should be on the screen for you soon to see. The address is kernsheriffcac@gmail.com. Again, kernsheriffcac@gmail.com. And there you go. Also, the Facebook page is KCSO Community Advisory Council, and that is available for you as well. As you've already heard, this is the first of a series of forums that we'll be holding. We plan to soon hold an event with Spanish translation. Going forward, we want to hold events throughout the county because this is a community-wide advisory council. Meeting announcements and events announcements are emailed to those who request that information through our Gmail account. So again, kernsheriffcac@gmail.com is how you can get on that notice list. The monitoring team you will hear is developing a community survey, which is another opportunity for the community to express opinions and share experiences. So watch for that survey and complete it. We thank you for your attention here today. Look forward to questions you may have and want to communicate with you fully. Thanks, Tiara.
Thank you, Marilyn. And now we will hear from Sheriff Youngblood with KCSO.
Thanks, thanks, Tiara. I've had a cold, so forgive me for sounding like a horse. You know, I find it ironic that the timing of our meeting today is with what's going on in the world. It accentuates the importance of all of us coming together, not just as a community, but as Americans. And we live in a very troubled world. Our mission statement, if you read it, it involves working in partnership with our community. Those aren't just words to us. There's a meaning there, and we've long believed in that meaning. Over the years, we've had several of these committees that we put together. And when we first started this one, I talked to my staff and I said, I've been around here for a few years and I've seen a lot of these committees come and go. And if you don't feed this committee and work together diligently, it will die. It'll go away, and the only ones to be on here, it will be us. And I think in 2 years, we've proven that we can do this, and we can do it extremely well with members of our community. Our Community Advisory Council started as just an informal discussion. There wasn't a lot of trust amongst all of the participants, but we soon learned that we were all in this for the right reasons. We were all in this for the same reason, and that was to make us a better organization and to establish better communication with the community that we serve. Because the only reason we exist is to serve our community, and we are very conscious of that. We never ever lose sight of that. It's important that you know that we started this committee before the stipulated agreement. We started this with the intent to make it successful. We started this with the intent to do a lot of things, irregardless of what the stipulated agreement said. We were way ahead of this. We were on board 100%. And I think you can look at the attendance of my staff today. In every meeting, they're here, they're involved. No excuses for not showing up. And I'm really pretty proud of the leadership role they've taken in this effort. I think if we can get face to face, this is going to be so much better than using Zoom. As we saw earlier, Zoom is very imperfect, and I hope everybody that wanted to get on can get on. We're starting establishing a new job classification, a community service technician that will allow us to hire people, put them to work. They get a chance to learn what deputies do. They get to do some of the job that the deputy does that we probably don't need the deputy doing, and it's really going to help us free up deputy sheriffs. It also gives us an opportunity for the young people that come to work to look at them, get to know them, they get to know us, and we build a relationship. And some of them will go on and want to become deputy sheriffs, which is a huge goal of mine. This Community Action Committee our council has been really successful so far, in my opinion, far above what we anticipated. We're far ahead of where I thought we would be, even with COVID. We've overcome COVID with this council, and we've had some great successes. The dialogue, the various topics that we talk about in the beginning, it was a little bit painful for all of us because to be open and honest, you have to give your opinion. And sometimes that isn't shared with other members. But what we found, and I think you all have found, is the opinions are all respected, which is one of the most important things. We look forward to continuing this Community Action Council. We look forward to more successes. My staff, there's not a day that goes by that we don't have a discussion about what we're doing. Number one, with the stipulated agreement, and secondly, with the Community Advisory Council, because it's extremely important to us, not just as officers, but as members of the community. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff Youngblood. And I do want to remind everyone, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And when we get to our panel discussion, I'll be able to call on you then. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Joseph Brand with the stipulation.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your patience, and staff dealt with that. Again, Tiara, thanks for the introduction. I am one of the monitors appointed by the court and agreed to by the parties, the Sheriff's Department, the county, and the California Department of Justice, to actually provide the oversight and ongoing assessment of the progress under this stipulated judgment. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. We obviously all, I think, want to get to some of the community issues, discussions, and the interaction that really needs to take place, because ultimately that's what this is about. This is your meeting, the community's meeting. But for those of you that are not familiar with this process, I'm going to just take a few minutes and quickly provide you a little bit of an orientation about the role of the monitoring team, what we do, what our work consists of, and also how to engage with us. The monitor is a qualified, neutral third party that's brought in to actually oversee the terms of the stipulated judgment, to make sure that there is progress being made towards these objectives, that ultimately we reach the point of achieving full compliance on the part of the department and the county with all of the provisions of the stipulated judgment itself. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific responsibilities in the areas that we deal with in just a moment. With respect to the monitoring team itself, there's myself and Dr. Angie Wolf, who were appointed as the monitors, the co-monitors. In addition, we have a staff, altogether there's 9 of us on the team, and the team can fluctuate actually to some extent based upon other types of resources we may need at any given point in time. But the members of this team were brought together specifically because of the skills, the background, the experience, expertise that they have in the areas, the various sections of the stipulated judgment that have to be addressed, have to be assessed in an ongoing manner. And as a result, that the monitoring team consists of individuals with a background in law enforcement, a background in research methodology, social sciences, and attorneys, people who've dealt with these types of issues from a community activist point of view and perspective as well. So that the skill sets are, they're blended in terms of this group, and you'll understand a little bit more about that in just a moment as I talk about some of the specific areas. But we have members of the team who are actually assigned to each one of these areas. And let me just go ahead and move on to that about, let's go and move on to what's the role of the monitor itself. If we could do that on the slides. That'll be the next slide. Just there, let's see, go back a couple there. Okay, the role is, it's about assessing the county's progress in implementing and achieving compliance with the stipulated judgment itself. So as I said before, what we do is we evaluate, we work with the parties to constantly evaluate what is going on, what's happening with respect to the implementation efforts. And fundamentally, the key areas that we tend to focus on, that we have to focus on, are initially looking at the organization's policies and practices, trying to make sure that those policies are reflective of contemporary policing practices. The training then that has to be provided to ensure that personnel throughout the organization are operating in a manner that's consistent with that, and ultimately assessing the level of attainment or achievement of the outcomes that are desired there. So we report on the status in each of these areas as we go through that process. Ultimately, when the organization reaches a point of the policies have all been taken care of, necessary revisions have been undertaken, training has been conducted, and the organization is actually functioning at
You accidentally went on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I'm back on that again now. Thank you. When that point in time is reached, at that point, the organization has to fall in complete sustained compliance for a period of a year at least, in order to be found in sustained compliance, and we can move beyond that. Once all of those provisions have been met, the organization is in sustained compliance, these outcomes are being achieved. At that point in time, we'll start transitioning the role of the monitor out, and this falls back increasingly upon the community and the organization. And ultimately, that's the real objective, that these things are measured, evaluated, and assessed by you folks working in concert with one another. We are there as monitors to also, if there's disputes, we try to help resolve those, to work collaboratively in a manner to bring about the intended outcomes. But to make it very clear, and a lot of times there's confusion about this, the monitor is not there to, in any shape, form, or fashion, to replace the role of the sheriff or the department itself. We actually are there only to evaluate what is going on. We don't have the authority. The department's not in receivership or anything of that nature. Sometimes some members of the community are expecting that, and also expect the monitor to come in and dictate to the organization exactly how things will be done. That's not the role. I want to dissuade anybody of that impression right off the bat. If we go to the next slide, I think the key here is that the monitor's reports are public. And we do prepare and provide annual reports to actually offer the public with a good overview of what has been happening, where the organization is, what the status of compliance is. And just so that you're aware, the first annual report was just completed and it was posted as of this morning. I'll come to a website in a little bit that you can touch upon, you can connect with to take a look at that annual report. There's one thing I want to say here too. In all the years that I have been doing this work, and I'm a former law enforcement official. I came up through the ranks. I was a police chief. I've worked extensively with departments around the country. I've been doing monitoring work for over 20 years now. And a couple of observations. One is that it takes a period of time, the first year, 18 months, of just developing the foundation, the relationships, getting focused on the specific tasks that have to be undertaken, putting the resources in place to actually carry out this the nature of this work. And the most critical element in that is the community. And the real point I want to make here is that not only is the department, have they shown us that they're very committed to this, but more importantly, I have never seen in any organization that I've worked with around the country, and in particular, any organization that's been under a consent decree or stipulated judgment, I've never seen any organization move as quickly as this one has, especially with respect to the work of the CAC. It is extraordinarily impressive. I think this is one of the most promising features and aspects of what can occur in Kern County. And I honestly believe, I sincerely believe, that you folks can serve as a model for other organizations around the country because of the way that you've come at this. And frankly, the totality of the way that you've embraced this from both a community perspective and the department perspective, and trying to work on these issues and to do that in a collaborative manner. like to go to the next slide, which is about the stipulated judgment. Again, I think most people are familiar at this stage with the fact that a stipulated judgment was put in place. Again, that came about based upon an agreement between the Sheriff's Department, the county, and the California Department of Justice. Those are the three parties. And you will oftentimes hear and see in our report that we're referring to the parties. That's who we are talking about. But the stipulated judgment came about because of the investigation that was conducted, the findings. I think one of the healthy things, and I was engaged in actually conducting the investigation as well. And one of the healthy things that we saw is the department was constantly seeking feedback about what they could do, how they could get out ahead of this, and recognizing that there are significant issues that have to be addressed. Those significant issues that have in many respects been driven by a lack of adequate staffing, a lack of the kinds of resources that need to be in place for a law enforcement organization to function in consistent with the expectations of 21st century policing principles. And again, the CAC and the department are both very much focused on that. That's what we will continue to work on. Finally, just a quick overview here about the various sections of the stipulated judgment. There are 8 specific provisions. This is what I was referring to when we were talking about the members of the monitoring team. And if you could go into that next slide, the sections of the stipulated judgment. Those briefly, those key areas, be one more from there. Those key areas have to do with the use of force, which is, in fact, the most significant area that we've been contending with, and one that's typically of major concern to any community. There you go, thank you. Stop searches and seizures, that has to do with the engagement of deputies on a continuing basis, how they interact with the public, following constitutional practices and ensuring that people's rights and their constitutional protections are always honored. Third area is responding to and interacting with people with behavioral and mental health issues, which has become a huge issue across the country over the last 30 or 40 years. Management and supervisory accountability actually transcends all of these areas, because ultimately this is all about, it truly is driven by the effectiveness of the organization is driven by the organization's ability to provide adequate and proper oversight in any one of these areas. Language access is a clear issue around the country, but in a county like Kern County, you've got a lot of diversity there, and that really has to be addressed. That's also a key issue with respect to recruitment, hiring, and promotions, and trying to make sure that the organization reflects the community that it serves. Community policing and problem-solving principles are key features and expectations that the Department of Justice identified that they want to see the department addressing, and that's consistent with the community expectations. And finally, the area of personnel complaint review and how those are processed. Those are the areas that we're focused on as a monitoring team that we will pay particular attention to. Should you need to contact us at any point in time, if you would go to the next slide, there is a website that we have, and the department will also be posting on their website, and it'll be done in a number of other connections and links that are provided, even through the California Department of Justice. This website will take you to this website link will take you to the website that we, the monitoring team, have, and you'll be able to contact us directly through that website. You will be able to access any of our reports. We'll also provide links back to the other organizations and entities that we're working with. And I'm sorry if I took a few minutes longer here than expected, but we had some unexpected complications there. We look forward to working with everybody. Thank you so much. And once again, keep at the good work that's being done here.
Thank you. And thank you for rolling with the punches there as we kind of ironed out those kinks. While I have you, we are going to be moving into our panel discussion and Q&A questioning. So I'm going to go to some of the questions that we've received, both private, both before this, and I see we just had another question come in the chat. So I'll go ahead with the chat first, and this comes from Edward Robinson. Research shows that when a sense of community is built, self-efficacy increases. Because of this, a suggestion which may be optimized results of reclassification and posting of jobs would arguably be to provide training opportunities for building self-efficacy, acquiring the skills needed to build independence in those jobs, and that would be posted aside. Or sorry, be posted. Aside from panel discussion efforts, has the board considered and or posted an RFP for a consultant on how to effectively apply best practices when developing the strategic plan to carry this out? I think I will kind of open that up to any of our committee members to discuss.
Tiara, I think I could speak to that, I believe, if no one else wants to take a grab at it. It's in terms of a RFP or a consultant, that's kind of the role the monitoring team is playing to advise us on best practices and kind of help guide us in those particular areas. We are engaged in regular meetings with county HR, our human resources, and our human resources personnel, along with the monitoring team who have experts in the realm of hiring and what best practices are out there. And we are in the works of developing a strategic plan in terms of recruitment and promotional. Once those plans are complete, we will be making those plans available to the public and posting them on our website.
Thank you. And either Joe or Georgina, if you guys want to kind of explain how the monitoring team came about, feel free.
Chair, if I could just see some clarification in your question. Are you referring to the establishment of the monitoring team or the work in this particular area?
Yeah, so the question particularly states, has the board considered and or posted an RFP for a consultant? So I'm taking this to mean specifically how your monitoring team came about with this whole judgment, but thank you.
Yeah, with regard to the monitoring team, I was approached originally about creating this team because of the work that we had done in the investigation itself. And the department asked me to consider that. We then assembled this team. The team that I've assembled, as I indicated earlier, brings together the skill sets that are necessary to ensure that the evaluation of these things takes place. The actual implementation, the design of the end product, so to speak, the strategies that will be used, some of the measures that will be undertaken relating to such things as looking at hiring, promotional practices, things of that nature that are addressed in the stipulated judgment. Those solutions are being developed in concert with between the department and the CAC itself, but with the guidance and the input coming back from both the monitoring team and the California Department of Justice. So with respect to need to bring in a consultant, I can appreciate the question that was offered up here, but frankly, I don't see a reason to commit additional financial resources to doing that because of the skill sets that are already in place in addressing this. And many of us have actually developed or worked with these specific issues in a variety of settings. My own case is an example. I've been engaged in developing strategic plans, not only in organizations that I was in, where I was a police chief, but working with dozens and dozens and dozens of agencies from across the country on these issues. We've got staff with the personnel skills background, recruitment specialists, things of that nature. I could go on and on about the skill sets. Georgina is a critical member of this team, as are a number of other people that have also been engaged in developing and implementing these types of strategies in law enforcement organizations.
Thank you. And another question we continue to receive from the public is that the monitoring team is just a check mark for the process. Could Sheriff Youngblood address that from his organization's perspective?
I'm sorry, Tiara, I was on the other line answering a pretty important question. Could you ask me again what you needed?
No problem at all. So the question that we continue to receive from the community is that the monitoring team is just a check mark for the process. Could Sheriff Youngblood address this from his perspective, from his organization's perspective?
Well, certainly I could say, yeah, it's just a check mark, but I don't think that the monitoring team would agree with me. And we've signed that agreement. My signature means something. It means that we agree to the stipulated agreement. It means that we're going to meet that agreement as quickly as possible, but we're not going to shortcut to get there. So the monitoring team, the only one on the monitoring team that I knew was Joe Brand. I did not know the other people involved, and I'm quite sure that they would all tell you that they don't feel like they're a check mark, nor do I.
Thank you.
Tiara, if I can add a quick comment on that front too. Just to make it clear, keep in mind that the other key party to this agreement is the California Department of Justice, who in fact launched the investigation, brought about the litigation, the negotiations around this. Believe me, the California Department of Justice is not going to sit back and just silently say, oh, fine. This is simply a check the block type of an approach about certain tasks being undertaken. This is all about achieving results and outcomes. That's what we're there to assess. And that's what we're constantly mindful of as we go through this process as monitors. And I think the public does need to be aware of that there's a specific role for the monitor, but ultimately this is really about the Kern County Sheriff's Department, the county itself, and the California Department of Justice coming around and reaching agreement that these outcomes have been reached.
Thank you. All right, another question that came in. As a resident of Kern who's directly impacted by the requirements named in the stipulated judgment, I don't agree with Mr. Braun's presentation and statement that the KCSO and CAC is a model process. The stipulated judgment was signed in December 2020 and it's March 2022. And this is the first public forum that I've had the opportunity to join. I haven't seen or read about the policy review process. I don't know about the updates on use of force data, which continues to be a big concern for Kern residents.
Tiara, can I address that?
Yes, I was going to have you do that. Thank you.
And thank you for that question. That is critically important. If you read the report, you will see that all of us are volunteers. None of us had prior experience in this space. We just knew something needed to be done. In any great initiative or campaign, there's a strategy session. There's a relationship building session. We could have come out and had, community meetings every month, but we needed to build a foundation to this. We needed to understand what it was. When I met with Sheriff Youngblood, it was out of pure emotions. But we quickly realized that this was a community-wide issue, not knowing anything about the stipulation at that time. As he stated earlier, this was a process that was started before the stipulation. So when the stipulation came in, it kind of complicated things for the council, because at that point in time, we needed to understand what was at hand. And it has taken us some time. But we never lost sight of the community voice in this process. So this is what this meeting is about, saying, here's what has happened. here's what it looks like going forward. Join us. We do have public meetings. We do not have a website. We do not have a budget, and that's something that they have asked us for. We intend on putting that in place, but this has been a big lift for the 25 plus council members and the under 10 plus that has worked tirelessly month in, month out. So to answer your question, you're absolutely correct. Going forward, we have our priorities in place. We understand what our responsibilities are. We've had an opportunity to build some communication with the Sheriff's Department and understand how they move and shape. We've had an opportunity to work with the monitoring team to understand what that looks like. So this year has really been about building a strategy, coming up with a plan to make sure that the community voice is heard, that the community voice is taken seriously. And I can guarantee you that is happening. So to the person who asked the question, please join in. We meet every third Monday of the month, and we would appreciate your voice in this process.
Tiara, I'd also like to add something else to that too. Again, I appreciate the comment and the perspective, but I would like to correct something that was stated here because it's not accurate. I did not say that this is a model process. What I did say is that this, in fact, in my view, has the potential to serve as a model for other organizations around the country who are endeavoring to accomplish these same things. And so there's a real distinction. One, it has to do with making a judgment about where things are versus where things might be. And my comments earlier, and what I want to reaffirm here, is I believe that potential exists here to truly ultimately serve as a model. But clearly there's a lot of work to be done. And until such time as the results are in, nobody should be making those kinds of assumptions or conclusions about this. It's one thing I oftentimes caution when people want to make reference to model policies and practices in policing around the country. The reality is there are very few models that you can turn to. There's a lot of promising practices that we oftentimes see that warrant further attention and consideration. But just because something is proving to be effective or successful in one community does not necessarily mean it's going to be a proven success in other communities at the same time. Every place is unique. That's one of the things that we have to recognize as monitors. That's one of the things that I think the community itself has to be cognizant of as you move forward with this too. Your solutions have to be developed and evolve around what your needs and what your issues are there.
And if I can add one thing to that, Joe, you know, some of the things that we had to overcome were unique with the monitoring team and with the Community Advisory Council. Is this is a unique county. We cover over 8,000 square miles. So to try and incorporate all of the outlying areas and get full participation, and then with the challenges of COVID, it made it a little bit more difficult, but we're seeing real progress now. And it was important that the CAC reflected all of the communities, and even the monitoring team in DOJ struggled a little bit at the beginning with truly grasping how big this county was and how large, you know, the different areas that we had to reach out to.
Thank you, Undersheriff. And Chief Levick, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I could just add on to that is the stipulated judgment did lay out what we needed to do in 2020. And like Arlena mentioned, we had to kind of build the structure from the ground up on how to get there and what those processes would be and come to a common understanding of what it might look like. And we're still in the formative stages of that. We do need to seek input from the public. COVID did interrupt the meetings we had planned and delayed a lot of them, and we ended up having to continue to do them on Zoom. So the plans are in place to go forward and continue to seek community input into our policies. We do have our policies posted online to make them available to the public on our website. We're also in development of making a transparency page to make it easier to make those things more accessible to the public and provide those links for input. But we're not there yet. We are making strides to get there, and we welcome the input.
Thank you. And Georgina, I see you with your hand up.
Thank you. So one of the original posters' comments was a really important one that I think we should address, which is, yes, the stipulated judgment was signed in December. However, the monitoring team wasn't actually chosen until February. So things take a little bit longer sometimes than what is assumed it'll be. We want to make sure as a monitoring team that we don't just go and parachute into your county and try to act like we know what you know. So that would be a disservice and really irresponsible and unprofessional. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we went to Kern County, meet with folks, and we did that. We had a chance to meet with a lot of you in the CAC. We've been to some CAC meetings. We've had, and thank you to Arlena, been able to communicate with different organizations in the county and introduce ourselves. Because what we found was that a lot of folks still didn't know that there was a stipulated judgment in Kern County, what a stipulated judgment is, and what a monitoring team is. So we had to start really with the basics and creating that foundation so that we can move forward. One of the first things I've been communicating, especially from the beginning, is that this process is meant to be long-standing and sustainable. So that's going to be a marathon and not a sprint. This is not something where compliance can be reached within a year or two. It's going to take time, and the reason that it's going to take time is because we want to make sure that things are done well. A comment on the chat also said, how is a monitor supposed to help KCSO reach compliance? And that's a really good question, right? Because we're not there to kind of serve as a hammer of the court. We are a neutral third party that is there to help assess and evaluate and provide technical assistance as well. So that means that we help them with timelines, personally, I'm working very closely with the CAC since the beginning and making sure that, hey, this is what the stipulated judgment asks for. This is what it requires. Let's interpret what that means and let's move forward to that later this year. So what happened in this last year is very common and very important, which is laying that groundwork and building those relationships. So that's step one. Now we're moving on to year two. And this is kind of where the rubber hits the road and where a lot of the fun's going to start. So I applaud how you're doing this community forum so that folks do know what the stipulated judgment is, do know what the CAC is and what the monitoring team is, so we can move forward. This year, what you're going to see from us also is that we're going to be working with the parties, right? Both California DOJ and KCSO to come up with compliance metrics and reach agreements of how we're going to measure this and how we're going to make sure that their compliance is reached and the steps necessary to get there. As Joe stated earlier, we're going to present an annual report where we're going to talk step by step of everything that the monitoring team has done in the reporting period, as well as all the other activities by the different parties. I'm going to use this time to plug in also our monitoring team website, KCSO monitoring.info. I hope folks take a good look at it. You can see the stipulated judgment there. You can see the annual report. You can see the CAC monthly meetings that are open to the public and the Zoom links. And you can contact us as well for any questions that you may have. So this is going to take some time, but there's definitely some strong positive steps that have been taken, and really put yourselves on a track to move forward in a really successful and sustainable manner.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. There's also another question a little bit below that from a reporter with the Bakersfield Californian, and it says, I have a question about Dr. Susan Lowell's comment. She mentioned reviewing the use of force and several others. Number one, Will reviewing these policies lead to actual change within KCSO? Number 2, if there are or are not changes, is there a timeline of when the public will know if, why, or why not the changes were or were not implemented? And I think I'll pose that to anyone on the Policy and Education Committee. I think we have Rosa also here. So either one of you guys, take it away.
Hi, Rosa, did you want to take a stab at it first?
Go for it, Susan.
Okay, thank you. Shani, I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning of my presentation, but I did mention that this process is going to be a rather iterative process where we're going to be continuously reviewing policy and we will be getting community feedback. And I think that this also is going to tie into the original question that it's 2022 and we don't have a policy yet. Initially, when we started, we just jumped in and we were reviewing policy, we were making edits and we were making recommendations. And then as we were getting started, we realized that we are not the first ones, we're not reinventing the wheel. This process has been happening in several counties across several states, and that there is a framework that exists that helps us guide this process in an informed way. And that is not led by suggestions and opinions, but that is actually led by research. And it's also led by some evidence-based strategies. So we had to take a step back and actually look at how we are reviewing policy so that our policy review process is that we can recreate it for every policy. We're not reviewing each policy in a different way. We're reviewing each policy in a systematic way that can be recreated. So that, I just wanted to answer that, why we slowed down on our process. The other question is, yes, of course, we are absolutely expecting change. We are reviewing policy with the expectation for positive change. And we wouldn't be here and wouldn't be doing this if we were just looking to do it for, just for the sake of doing it. There's many other activities that we could be doing instead. We are doing this because we are interested, we're passionate, we are community members, and we are going to positively benefit from any change that happens from this process. So we all have background in our own professional lives that we're bringing to this, but ultimately we want the community's feedback. And so that is also a thing that is slowing us down in terms of how to get this community feedback, how to give the community opportunities to jump in and not only provide suggestions, but see if they are happy with how those suggestions have been incorporated. So yes, to answer your question, we are absolutely anticipating change. We want change, and we want this process to be collaborative with the community.
Thank you. And also, Chief Levick, if you want to kind of explain the process of when your office is adopting policy or recommendations, I should say.
Yes, so as it started out, what I did is I sent a letter to the policy subcommittee, introducing them to the process involved. And I recommended that they look at our current policies that were posted online, start to gather their thoughts for any sort of input that might be required into that. Meanwhile, our staff proceeded to try and make changes in meeting with the monitoring team to draft what we believe might get there. And I recently sent those drafts or updates to the CAC as well to gain their input. Some of the processes involved, not only do we get, the CAC had decided they wanted to present some of those policies here, and make the public aware of them and seek that input to take that input into consideration and giving us their formal recommendations on what that final input is going to be. Once we receive that, we would look at the input, incorporate what we can into it, If there's any issue, we would communicate those issues back and forth, work them out. If ultimately it is just input, as there's no guarantee that what they're offering is something that we have to put in there. We still have to run that by the monitoring team. We have to run it by DOJ. We have to run it through all the various stakeholders in the policies, the affected labor unions, the attorneys for county council. So there's a lot of different steps in that process, and it can change, and it can be it can evolve as it goes through there. But ultimately, once it makes it through that process, we would send the final draft back to the CAC, and then also ultimately post to the website, so the public would be made aware of what it looked like before by going there now and ultimately seeing the end product.
Thank you. And then I also want to pass it over to Arlena to discuss one of the changes that has already been implemented.
So to answer your question, as I think they've shared, these processes take a long time. To our surprise, we thought we can come in here and tell, hey, here's what we think, and it happens. It doesn't happen like that. As Chief Levick's shared, there's a lot of processes that happen. This is why it is so important that the community is engaged to understand what that process looked like. So Dr. King and I went on a ride along, and I'm going to be honest with the community, I would have never imagined doing a ride along with law enforcement. It just wasn't what I did, right? But working with them and really seeing the commitment on a lot of these law enforcement men and women, I mean, of course, there are some that are bad. All of us should stand on the right side of the law and get rid of the bad ones, absolutely. But there are a lot of good ones. I had the opportunity to do a ride along with with Chief Levick's. To my surprise, I had no idea what happened throughout a night. So Dr. King and I went in with him to their communication center, I think that's what it was. And we listened to them take calls. And Chief Levick, you can also comment on this. And there was a specific way in which they were asking the question. From my perspective as a community member, it sounded very leading. And so we made a suggestion of a way that we thought that can happen a little bit better, a little less leading. And they were able to implement that change throughout their organization. So I'm sharing this to say this, they are listening. They are listening to the community. They are taking our feedback and implementing change where it can be made. We also made recommendation around the way that their policies are navigated, that they took that change too. This is why it's so important for the community to step up and to have their voices heard, because they want changes just like we want change. Commander Chief, I get it, he's just been promoted, so I'm so used to calling him Commander Levick. If you can kind of reiterate from your perspective, I really want the community to understand that changes do happen when we step up. They've also, another thing I'm going to share before I give you the floor, the community shared about wanting to look at the budget. Well, they've said, yes, let's look at our budget together. Let's figure out where we can move some resources. So this is absolutely an opportunity for the community to get engaged like historically never before, but we have to do our part. So Commander, I'm gonna let you finish that one.
Yes, we had a question from Ashani asking if you could clarify what you meant by leading, and I can answer that if you'd like. So what Arlena was talking about is when we're taking calls and dispatchers are asking for description, they ask the question, is he white, black, or Hispanic? And so Arlena posed the question, why do we ask it that way? And when she asked it, that was a perfect example of why we need the community input sometimes, because sometimes there's no real rhyme or reason as to how something was developed or why we do it a certain way. And so when she asked that, I was like, that's a good question. I don't know that we ever put any thought into how we asked those questions. And she basically identified that it was a leading question and that maybe a more open-ended question would be more suitable for that. And so that's what I took that back to the communication center and asked them to take a look at that and figure out a way to ask it more open-ended. And that way it's not a leading question, getting a description into 1 of 3 categories by asking, what race do you perceive them to be, or what race are they? It makes it more open-ended and it allows for the person to be more descriptive in that. And then if we need to, then we can ask those follow-up questions.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to one of the questions posed. It says, we understand this is a process, and I'm hearing that this timeline is not unusual. It has been well over 1 year since the stipulated judgment. Can we establish a timeline for future community engagement platforms, or is it still too early to visit this? Can we start addressing future obstacles that may interfere with consistent community engagement? And Marilyn, I think as far as communications, I'll let you answer that one.
Thank you, Tiara. It's a great question, and I am encouraged by not only the participation at the meeting, but the engagement and the good questions that you have. I think we've already talked about the fact that it does take a while to get started, and that we have in particular faced challenges this year, perhaps like no other, with COVID. Our primary goal, as I believe the communication committee and all of the advisory committee feels, is to develop a strong sense of trust. And that takes time. We want to meet in person, and we want to do this throughout the county. We've already talked about the fact that it's a very diverse county. So this is really our first foray into a meeting that's focused on the community's questions. We would encourage you to join our regular monthly meetings where there are updates from each committee and you can hear about the work. There is a process, if you will use the email kernsheriffcac@gmail.com. If you're interested in becoming a member of the council, there is a process for that. And we look to have a very balanced committee in terms of where people live and so forth. So that's something that you can do. You can express your opinions at any of our monthly meetings. And yes, absolutely, tomorrow we are meeting to debrief this meeting and really begin planning where, when, and how our next community meetings will take place, because it is the voice of the community that is critical in this process. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Marilyn. And just to kind of piggyback off of that, when a community member has a complaint to be addressed, how should they go about that?
There's an established method with KCSO for complaints. And if you go to their website, it delineates the process, I should say processes, because the steps that are followed are a little bit different depending on is this a personnel complaint or what type of complaint it is. There is on that site escalation for complaints. It is not the role of the CAC to do an investigation or review complaints. We will refer you to the existing process. We can perhaps take a look at processes, but we're not looking at individual experiences.
Thank you. And another question that came in. So is there still room to apply to be on the CAC? Arlena.
So I answered that question in the chat. We have 4 seats available. There is a process that there is a selection committee that goes through and selected it. It includes the Sheriff's Department and community members who will select the community. We are looking for 4 members who are willing to get on here, roll their sleeves up and work. So yes. And I also want to, if it's okay, Andrea's question about being concerned about community engagement process. From
Arlena, it looks like you froze up there a little. Well, until we get her back, Yeah, until we get her back, we will move on. I think we've got time for another question. If you have it, put it in the chat. I will probably have time for about one or two more. And then we will go ahead and wrap up for the day. So.
Tiara, a couple of comments I can make while we're waiting to see if there are other questions. 2 points I'd like to make, just building on something that Marilyn mentioned a moment ago. I think it's important for the public to be aware of this too. The monitoring team is also not there to investigate complaints, allegations of various sorts, what have you, that might be made against the department. Oftentimes there's an assumption that the monitoring team is there to serve as a different vehicle or a mechanism by which community complaints and allegations of misconduct, use of force, things of that nature are going to be handled and investigated. In fact, that's not the case. However, we are very actively engaged in monitoring and assessing what's happening in those particular areas. What we are trying to do is to make sure that the department is following all legal guidelines and standards and their own policies and good practices in the course of investigating complaints, allegations of misconduct, et cetera. So we will constantly be taking a look at specific cases and incidents, doing auditing. We've got certified auditors on the team, people that are very sophisticated doing this, looking for patterns, trends, things of that nature, and providing that feedback to the organization and that feedback to the Department of Justice, and looking for resolution and improvement in those areas should those things be noted. However, we are oftentimes made aware people will come to us with specific allegations, and what we will do is encourage them to follow the normal protocols, because the key in this is also making sure that when those allegations or complaints are filed, that they're heard, they're listened to, the response from the department is objective and appropriate. So it's really a matter of assessing whether or not the organization is practicing what their policies call for in the first place. So that's the first point. I just want to make that clear, but please don't ever hesitate to contact the monitoring team should you have specific issues that you want to make sure are being followed up on. Another point too, going back to an earlier comment or question about the role of the monitoring team, and where I was stressing that we're there to assess and evaluate. But if in fact there is a disagreement, let's say that the department disagrees with some of our findings, or that has a view that we're not giving them due credit, or alternatively DOJ feels that there's not agreement between the department and the California Department of Justice and Kern County Sheriff's Department about particular findings that we have. The objective there is to try to ensure that we have a fair treatment of the issue and arrive at a position that is reasonable and appropriate. But if any of the parties, either DOJ or the Sheriff's Department, as an example, feels that's not the case, they have the ability to take it to the court. Ultimately, the court is the final authority. And we, the monitoring team, are there representing not just the Department of Justice, but the court itself, in trying to ensure that our work in reporting back covers all the facts and reasonable decisions, conclusions can be drawn to deal with those issues. So again, just a clarification about who ultimately the final authority is. The Department of Justice itself actually has the authority to make certain decisions and findings on this, but if there's disagreement, it can be taken to the court. Thank you.
Thank you. And will the monitoring team and CAC present the findings of the report to the public? The public would like to know whether the use of force and past concerns have improved.
Well, it's in all honesty, it's too early in the process to draw any conclusions there. We have not even begun the auditing processes yet. There's mechanisms that had to be developed. There's things that have to be done internally by the department. There's data that we're going to have to spend time plowing through, and then we have to actually audit particular cases and assess whether or not we're seeing improvement and our evidence of any patterns or continuation of any patterns or practices that the California Department of Justice originally concluded and that led to the stipulated judgment itself. So that will be done, but as we were trying to describe earlier, we're still somewhat early on in the process. I think the foundation is in place, but here in this coming year is when we'll be very actively engaged in tracking cases and incidents and then coming back with findings, and reports will be issued, not only our annual report, but as we do audits, as an example, we will issue the findings from those audit reports. Those will also be posted online as well.
And thank you. And if I could have Commander Kessler speak about the annual use of force report.
Yes, we're putting together from 2020 the annual use of force report, and we're currently have a draft that we're starting to work on the 2021 use of force report, and hopefully in the next couple of months we'll have that. So once that draft is reviewed, it will be shared along with to the monitoring team, the CAC committee, and the public for publication, for review and comments and everything else. So there is a process with that too, and we have the draft submitted and is being reviewed, and then we'll move that forward through the process along with the other ones. But we are working hard to catch up on these annual reports and get them published out to the public to see. Along with our website, the transparency page is up, but the content is slow to evolve on it, and we're working rapidly to update all the content so we have up-to-date information on that page.
Thank you. And Stephanie, I do see we have 2 more questions there, but we are running short on time now. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Arlena.
What am I saying? I have no idea what's going on with my internet.
You're closing us out here.
Awesome. I just want to, Stephanie, we are going to make sure that our language is equitable and inclusive. Again, there were some challenges that we had to address. As you know, the Sheriff's Department is becoming more technical savvy. It is what it is. We're working through that. And thank you for that question. That is very important to the CAC. It's very important to the KCSO. And we do anticipate our next community meeting having various languages available. We are working with Coven on that, and Rosa has committed some resources for that, and Marissa's worked with us. So yes, we intend to. So I'm going to close out. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Sheriff Donnie Youngblood for the opportunity to come in and be very honest. With the Sheriff's Department, it was, as he said earlier, it was uncomfortable, but we stood in our truth. They stood in their truth. I want to thank Mr. Joe Bruin for really being transparent to a lot. This work is hard work, and it only happens when we come to the table and we're honest. And I want to apologize in advance for my video being off, but I'm having technical issues. And I will really encourage you to share your email with Marilyn Droppers, who's our communication chair, so that you can join us each month and find out what you can bring to the table. This work only happens when we do it together as a community. All are welcome. All have been invited. We have done an extensive, based on our ability, search for community members. We know people receive messages different ways. We're trying to figure out what those ways look like. That's why it's so important that this table is diverse, so that diverse voices can be to the table. The sheriff understands that theirs could be better communication with the community. As community members, let's make sure that happens by being at the table, being a part of this work. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Spending 90 minutes having a conversation is resources, but it's very important that we do this. So that's my close. Tiara, thank you for being such a phenomenal moderator. Thank you, Marilyn Droppers and your team, for really putting this together. You have done a phenomenal job. It wasn't easy, but you made it happen. And I want to thank, again, Sheriff Youngblood for allowing his team to be a part of every conversation. And they showed up eager and engaged, which was very pleasant. And so thank you, everyone, for today.
And Tiara, if I could, I just want to remind everyone that's on this call that we have ride-alongs, we have the Community Academy, we have tours. Please feel free to call us, come down. We'd love to have you, the community ride along and see what we see.
Thank you. And thank you for all of our participants. Again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to submit them to kerncac@gmail or I'm sorry, kernsheriffcac@gmail, or check out that link. Georgina had put it in the chat. If you want to plug it in one more time there, Georgina, for the monitoring team's website, you can follow up there. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Tiara. I just note that the website is on the Georgina's website is on there, and I think David Kessler's also put the the Kern Sheriff site on there too as well.
Yes, and the transparency has a link. Same with the complaint process, and our policies is all on our kernsheriff.org website.
Lots of resources. Thank you.
If I can have someone address Stephanie's question, for those who have to get off, please do. But she really wants this question answered. So Commander Lovix, if you can look in there and determine who needs to answer that question. I want to make sure that our community members leave here feeling like their questions was answered. And those who have to get off. And if you all are okay, if that's okay with you, Sheriff Youngblood, can we address these questions that are in the chat?
I can remain on to address the questions if everyone else wants to get off.
So can I.
So are we talking, will the use of force report include all incidents of use of force, not just those resulting in serious bodily and or death as required to be reported to the DOJ?
Yes, I can answer that question. We're listing all our different force options and how many were used throughout that reporting period, and also the type of injuries to not only to the officer, but also to the individual. So everything will be out in the open, and then you can interpret the data how you want as far as the numbers go. That's what we're looking to produce.
And we're also trying to draft our use of force report around the parameters that are outlined in the stipulated judgment on what needs to be included in that.
All right, and I am going to go ahead and log off. I do know that there are more questions coming in, so I'm going to pass the baton over to Marilyn. And again, thank you all for joining. I look forward to what we're going to accomplish going forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tiara. So I'm trying to see what other questions.
Marilyn, can you clarify what info data is being included in the report that Mr. Kessler mentioned is being drafted?
Well, the data is going to outline the incidents that had force used on them, how it was reported, along with demographics of calls for services or call volume. It's going to be a wealth of information about the totality of the Sheriff's Department, along with the force that was used not only on the correctional side, but on the law enforcement patrol side, and along with the different demographics and type of force that's used. So there will be a wealth of information in there with the actual numbers and graphs and the data for you guys to analyze once it comes out. I hope that answered your question for this.
The other request that I see was to put the CAC email address in the chat, and I put that there, kernsheriffcac@gmail.com. And let's see, other questions. I think we've answered those last questions. Do you see another one, Arlena?
Shani, did we place a transparency website link in there for her? And if someone can place that and say transparency so that she would know exactly where to go. And Stephanie, were your questions answered? If you want to come off mute, that's fine. If you just want to post in chat, that's fine as well.
I think maybe, did we address her first question? The one she posted at 4:48? Or if not, maybe we need to think about that one and address it with her.
Yeah, we addressed it in the chat stating that that is definitely a priority.
I think it has been addressed. Let me see, there's some new messages now. The transparency link is there.
Remember,
Stephanie,
that page is still under construction, so the data might not be all the way up to date, but we're working hard to get that up to date.
And I can address, I believe I can address that last question from Stephanie is the monitoring team is reviewing. They do have access to our complaints to verify that we are investigating those complaints as we are required to do. So they do have access to those. I think they're just saying that they're not the investigating authority over those complaints. So if there were issues that we weren't taking these complaints seriously or we weren't thoroughly investigating them, they would be privy to that, and they would be reporting back to that on that to DOJ, and I'll let them speak to that. But with that being said, if there is the feeling as hesitation for people to come forward, they can submit complaints anonymously. We are also working on making those complaints available online to be submitted online as well.
okay.
Eric, thank you for the way that you described that too. For Stephanie's benefit, I just want to reinforce once again, what I was trying to clarify here is we do not actually conduct an investigation of somebody's complaint. What we're doing is tracking whether or not that investigation is, or that the department conducts an appropriate investigation of the complaint, because our job is to assess whether the department's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's not to actually conduct the investigation, and frankly, that would defeat the purpose of the settlement agreement, the stipulated judgment in the first place. It's all about trying to ensure that we get to a stage that we're all confident, the community, the department, the Department of Justice, we're all confident that the mechanisms and the practices are in place and operating as they should be. So hence the monitor evaluates that. But we do pay close attention to these. We take a very detailed view of the investigations as we're reviewing and auditing those. But it's just not our role to actually conduct the investigation. It's to assess how it was handled and whether or not it was handled appropriately.
Okay. Thank you. If there are further questions, if you would submit them through the Kern Sheriff CAC email, so kernsheriffcac@gmail.com, we will answer you directly, as well as ensure that we cover that topic or that question at future forums. And we will announce those through the website. So with that said, thank you everyone for your attention and time. We appreciate your comments and your dedication to this important topic. Thank you and have a good evening.
Great job, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.